I can't keep you safe any longer, Kody. The words fell into the hushed courtroom like a clap of thunder. They didn't simply linger in the air. They exploded it. All eyes stopped. The lawyers ceased riffling through papers. Fingers hovered above the typewriter keys for the court reporter. A spectator somewhere near the back let fall their pen, the clatter too loud in the quiet. Each and every eye was on Robyn Brown. This was not the Robyn most people were accustomed to viewing. The woman on the witness stand appeared different, without the guarded smiles and gentle defenses she had worn for so long. Her hands were so tight around the edge of the wooden podium that her knuckles had whitened. Her dark hair cascaded loosely down her shoulders, but one strand stuck to her cheek, held by the wetness of unshed tears she had not swept away. And her tone? Her tone didn't shake the way it had in the past, when she'd stick up for Kody during family disputes or in public interviews. It was edgy now, hard, almost menacing. Not the tone of someone who's unsure, the tone of someone who's finished. Kody's response was immediate. His eyes grew wide, hazel spots glinting off the bright sunlight from the high courtroom windows. That confident, smug look he typically wore in moments like these was not present. Instead, something he did not recognize, and found disturbing: fear. He sat at the defense table, wearing his dark suit, a tie that was slightly too tight around his neck. His hand, halfway through reaching for a glass of water, remained suspended. The condensation ran down the side of the glass, forming on the table, but he didn't appear to notice. For the first time ever, Kody Brown, the man who never was speechless, never was caught without an excuse, never was without the final word, seemed to be speechless. The judge, a severe-looking woman with short silver hair and an unflappable demeanor, tapped her gavel gently. "Mrs. Brown," she said in a level voice. "Please proceed." Robyn took a deep breath, as if steadying herself for the ordeal ahead. Her chest expanded and fell, and in that instant, the burden of years seemed to come to rest upon her shoulders. She looked down at her shaking hands, then up again. Not at Kody, but forward toward the judge. "I believed I knew him," she started, her tone low but firm. "I believed I knew the man I had married. But I was mistaken." The words fell hard, and the room was filled with gasps. The audience wasn't the only one that reacted, either. Even the bailiff's eyes flashed to her, briefly breaking the granite-faced professionalism. In the front row, Christine Brown leaned over and gripped Janelle's hand tightly. The two women shared a glance. Not one of victory, but of stunned silence. This was the moment they had prayed for, perhaps even fantasized about, but never imagined would arrive. And then there was Mary. A few seats away from her, she sat straight as a board, her arms crossed. Her face was impassive, but her eyes, sharp, calculating, remained trained on Robyn, as though trying to determine if this was for real or just an act. Robyn's eyes finally broke, ever so slightly, to Kody. "Years," she said. "I stood by him. I defended him when the world accused him of being selfish. I told myself people just didn't get it. That the anger, the accusations, the coldness, it was just pressure. It was just stress. I believed that." Her voice broke a little on the final word, but she kept going. "I said to myself he loved us, that his choices were for the benefit of our family. I chose him over everyone else, over friends, over the other wives, over my own peace. And in return," her voice broke, and she swallowed hard. "In return, he gave me lies." The crowd shifted. You could hear snatched whispers. "She's finally speaking out. And is she betraying him?" Before the judge quickly gave them a harsh look that silenced them all. Robyn moved aside, her hand grazing the microphone before her, releasing a soft static buzz into the air. "I see it now. Everything. The favoritism, the manipulation, the way he would spin the truth until it fit his needs. I used to say it was leadership, but it wasn't. It was control. And I didn't see it because I wanted to think that I had picked the right man." Kody's face set in a tight line. He leaned forward in his chair, his lips opening as though to begin to speak. But his lawyer, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses, placed a gentle touch on his arm to remind him. Robyn didn't let him. The truth is, I didn't select a partner. I selected a king. A man who needed a throne, not a family. There was a visible, oh my God, from somewhere in the second row. Robyn's eyes shone as she continued. And I stood up for it. I stood up for it. When Christine left. When Janelle got up to him. When Mary's heart was shattered. I said to myself they didn't understand the side of him. I did. But perhaps they did. Perhaps they understood it before I did. And she stuttered, her voice trembling for the first time. I dislike myself for not trusting them. The air was heavy. Even the creaking sound of someone adjusting in their seat was too loud in the weight of the silence that followed. Kody sat back now. His face white, his lips set into a taut line. His hands were folded before him, fingers interlaced tightly enough that his knuckles turned white. Robyn finally stared at him directly. Not with love, not with devotion, but with something much more biting. Clarity. Kody, she said, her voice firm once more. You said we were starting a family, but what you were starting was a kingdom, one in which only your opinion counted. And I assisted you in constructing it. I was your most faithful soldier. But today, she inhaled slowly. Today I retire my sword. The words seemed to reverberate off of the wood-paneled walls. Christine closed her eyes, as though relishing the moment. Janelle gazed, unwavering, lips open. Mary's jaw clenched, barely, but her eyes never wavered from Robyn. The judge coughed. Mrs. Brown, you may continue your testimony. Robyn's shoulders rolled up and down once more, her eyes still fixed on the man she had once vowed to love forever. The man she would now have no trouble revealing. The silence that ensued wasn't merely the silence of nothing. It was the sound of something snapping. The air in the courtroom was now thicker. The silence was no longer neuter. It was charged, heavy, like the stifling stillness before a storm unleashes. Robyn stood at the stand, the microphone before her recording each tiny quiver of her breathing. She did not hurry. She waited just long enough for every single one in the room to appreciate the gravity of what she had just informed them of in Section 1. Her gaze fell for a moment to the papers on the desk before her. But she didn't lay hands on them yet. She didn't require them. This section, these phrases, wasn't being read from scripted notes. They were emerging from a place much more profound. Used to tell myself, she started slowly, voice more even now, that Kody was a good man, that every hard word, every cold shoulder, every fight, was just him feeling the pressure of having a big family. I told myself he had no other choice but to be firm, to be decisive, to be right all the time. She glanced over briefly into the public seating. When Christine left, I kept saying to myself she was impatient, that she didn't know him. When Janelle began speaking up, I figured she was being disrespectful. And when she fell apart, I told myself it was her fault for not working hard enough. Robyn's voice grew thicker on the last sentence. And all that time, I believed I was doing the right thing by protecting him, by standing by his side. She stopped. The stopping wasn't hesitation. It was calculated. It allowed the weight of what she said to sink in for everyone listening. Then she turned, turning to face Kody for the first time since she stood in the witness stand. Her eyes met his, and her voice, while still soft, rang out for all to hear. But I see now. I wasn't defending him. I was enabling him. Kody winced slightly, almost imperceptible, but enough for the people around him to see. His attorney pushed up his glasses, leaning forward to whisper something to him, but Kody didn't glance away from Robyn. I see now, she continued, that the way that he treated the others was not misunderstanding. It was not bad timing. It was not even frustration. It was control. And it was cruelty wrapped in the guise of leadership. Gasps swept like a ripple through the crowd, swiftly suppressed by the bailiff's stern stare. Robyn's voice grew stern. He said we were creating a family. But families hear one another. Families leave space for all voices. What Kody constructed was a space where only his voice held value, where every conflict was considered disloyalty, where love was conditional, offered to the obedient, withheld from those who challenged him. Her eyes were shining, but she didn't glance aside. And I was blind to it because I wanted to believe in him. I needed to believe in him. I had left my past for him. I had trusted him with my future, and the possibility that I could have been wrong. She shook her head. her lip quivering. It was too painful to even consider, so I didn't. She shifted slightly toward the judge, shattering her gaze on Kody. I kept telling myself that I was a good wife. I was convinced that loyalty was never questioning him, never questioning his decisions. But true loyalty. She paused, the voice fading. True loyalty is telling the truth, even if it hurts. Christine's eyes filled with tears in the front row. Janelle's lips trembled, but she kept her chin high. Even Mary's folded arms seemed to relax, just slightly. Robyn's fingers finally landed on papers in front of her. She took them up, but didn't read from them yet. The night I learned what actually went down with Garrison. She paused, her voice breaking for the first time. She placed the papers down, pushing them away, as if they scorched her fingertips. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. And for the first time in years, I looked at Kody and saw a stranger. The room was quiet with only the soft whir of the ceiling fans. I asked him, Robyn went on, her voice more level now, to call his son, to be a father, just try. But he said instead that Garrison had to learn a lesson. And that's when something inside me snapped. Because what lesson does a child need more than to know his father's love isn't on terms? Her words landed hard. Christine grabbed hold of Janelle's hand once more, their fingers clenched tightly. Robyn's eyes drifted back to Kody. That evening, I understood that I could no longer shield him. Because shielding him was to be disloyal to every child in our household, including my own. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw clenching. His face was torn between rage and incredulity, as if he couldn't make up his mind to snarl at her, or attempt to wheedle her into being quiet again. But it was too late. Robyn breathed deeply again. I'm not here today because I hate him. I'm here because I loved him. And I can't stand by and watch him hurt the people he says he loves anymore. Her final words fell with the force of a gavel blow. Absolute, irrevocable. The judge leaned forward a fraction, her eyes pinched as though considering each word. Mrs. Brown, she said cautiously, please proceed with your testimony. Robyn nodded deliberately, shifting her hold on the podium. Her voice fell to a whisper, forcing all of them to lean forward in order to listen. This is the truth, she stated, and I will not retract it. The atmosphere in the room was charged. It seemed like the air itself was tensing, waiting for what was to come. For an instant, the silence that followed Robyn's statement was so profound it was painful to draw breath. You could sense it bearing down, as if the walls of the courtroom itself were holding its breath. Kody's hands, folded together on the defense table, started twitching. Not a lot, but enough that anyone who looked closely could detect the tension. His knuckles were white, the skin taut, his lips were compressed into a thin line, but his eyes blazed with something between desperation and disbelief. And then suddenly he shifted. The chair scraped across the tile floor as he came to his feet, the noise jolting the room like a snapping twig. Heads swiveled. Whispers quickly spread throughout the stands before being promptly stifled. Kody, his lawyer, whispered, reaching out to gently clasp his arm, a wordless request to return to his seat. But Kody brushed him aside, his attention fixed solely on Robyn. Robyn, he told him, his own voice low but insistent, the kind of voice that had once caused arguments to be settled in their own home. This is not fair. The gavel rang out lightly. Mr. Brown. But Kody's voice lifted, not to a shout, but to a cutting through of the tension. You know me better than anybody, better than Christine, better than Janelle, better than Mary. You know me, Robyn, and you know I've done everything for this family. Everything I've done was for you, for us. Robyn didn't blink. She didn't glance away. She just stood there, listening to him, her face impassive. Kody took a small step forward, the toe of his polished shoe just barely crossing the invisible line between his space and the witness area. You're letting them get to you, he continued. You've been talking to Christine, haven't you? Janelle, this isn't you, Robyn. This is them putting things in your head. His lawyer tugged lightly at his sleeve again, this time more urgently. But Kody's pride was in full control now, not reason. You believe I wanted this to happen the way it has? His words rose in pitch, his voice cracking at the break. You believe I liked losing the family we had. Every decision I ever made was because someone had to be in charge. Someone had to make the tough decisions. And you? He pointed a finger her way, his voice almost gentle for a moment. You were the one I could rely on. Robyn's mouth opened, but she didn't cut him off. Power in the room was tipping not to Kody, but to the vision of him disintegrating. You said to me, he continued, talking fast now, that you get me, that you knew I wasn't perfect, but that you would be there for me. And now you're up here, lecturing me like I'm somehow. His voice broke again, this time with something that sounded genuinely close to feeling, some kind of monster. The voice of the judge broke through, strong and adamant. Mr. Brown, this is not your time to speak. Return to your seat, or I will have you escorted out of the courtroom. Kody swung his head in the direction of the bench, his chest rising and falling with a little effort. But the threat in the eyes of the judge was enough to shift him back a pace. He looked at his lawyer, who quickly whispered something in his ear. Kody ground his jaw, then grudgingly settled back into his chair. But the damage was done. The tantrum had torn away the polished, controlled facade he always worked so hard to maintain. By the far wall, Christine squeezed Janelle's hand harder. She leaned in close enough to say, "He's cracking." Robyn finally broke her silence, and her voice was peaceful, but laced with the burden of 1,000 unspoken words. "You're right on one point, Kody," she said. "I knew you better than anybody, but perhaps that's the catch. Because knowing you does not necessarily imply that I agree with you, and loving you does not necessarily mean that I will lie for you." The words cut like a gavel blow. Kody blinked, as though the sentence had actually hit him. His lips clenched, his face taut, but his shoulders slumped a little way, an almost negligible indication that something within him had absorbed the knock. The judge nodded to Robyn. "Please go on, Mrs. Brown." She turned back toward the bench, her voice steady once more. "I'm not here to destroy him. I'm here to tell the truth. And the truth is, Kody doesn't lead this family, he rules it. And in ruling it, he's lost the very thing he claims to be protecting, the love and trust of the people who were willing to follow him." Kody's fingers, which were at rest on the table, clenched into fists. His attorney's pen inched its way over the table edge, unobserved. Robyn took a tremulous little breath. "I don't want revenge. I don't want to hurt him. I just want the truth to finally be important enough to him that his pride doesn't get in the way." The room fell silent once more, but it wasn't the charged silence of earlier. It was a silence of understanding, the sort where everyone in the room realizes they've just seen a turning point. Even Mary, who had been inscrutable until this moment, released a quiet breath and sat back, her gaze slightly softening. The judge looked over at Kody, then back at Robyn. "Mrs. Brown, you can go ahead with any evidence you have to substantiate your testimony." Robyn nodded, bending down to remove a big manila envelope from the floor. As she drew out the first batch of documents, Kody's eyes tracked her movements with something new dancing in his eyes. Not merely anger, but fear. And for the first time in years, Robyn wasn't the one turning away. Robyn's hands shook gently as she smoothed out the papers on the witness stand. The tiny pieces of paper appeared plain, black ink on white paper, but the burden they bore was anything but. "These," she hesitated, her voice constricting. "These are notes Kody wrote me while Garrison was struggling." The courtroom leaned forward, a shared breath, as they felt the time was nearing a turning point. Even the bailiff's normally unchanging eyes fluttered towards the papers in her hands. Robyn's lips clamped together, as if she was trying to anchor herself. She looked down, scanning the top of the page before continuing to talk. "I pleaded with him to call. I pleaded with him to attempt it, to fix things before it was too late. I explained to him his son needed him, not as a commander, not as some figure of authority, just as a father." She swallowed hard as she read from the paper, her lashes glinting. "But instead, he sent letters like this." She read in a choked voice. "He needs to learn a lesson." The words rang in the courtroom, more oppressive than they need have been. The silence that followed was crushing. Christine shut her eyes tightly, her lips clenched hard, as if fighting not to cry. Janelle looked at Robyn, tears pricking at her own eyes. Mary kept her eyes fixed on Kody, her face set in something that could slice steel. Robyn laid the paper down again, but did not cease. "And this one," she turned to another page, her voice shaking but increasing in volume. "He'll come around when he realizes he can't win against me. Gasps spread among the audience. The judge looked at Kody, whose face had turned white, his jaw working in silence. Robyn's voice cracked totally now. This wasn't reconciliation. This wasn't love. This was winning. It was control. And I can no longer stand here and shield you, Kody. A tear tracked down her cheek, but she did not brush it away. Instead, she stiffened her spine, pushing on. Because shielding you is forsaking the truth. And I will not do that. Not for you, not for anyone. Her hands trembled as she took hold of the pile of papers, but her speech became firmer with each word. I have been quiet for far too long. I believed silence was devotion. I believed keeping your secret made me a good wife. But all it did was allow this to go on. And now there's no turning back. She glanced at the judge, her voice gentler, but somehow even stronger. I stand here today for my children, for my stepchildren, for every member of this family who has been silenced, dismissed, or told that their pain was their own fault. Christine brushed away her cheek. Janelle allowed her tears to flow freely now. Even Mary, normally collected, blinked swiftly before hastily avoiding her gaze. Robyn took a deep breath and stepped away from the mic, as if she needed the extra room just to breathe. She placed her palm firmly on the pile of papers, anchoring herself. When I married Kody, she explained, I thought we were going to build something beautiful, a family with love, faith, and respect. I stood up for him when people said he was selfish, when the world turned against him, when the women who loved him left him. I stood up for him even when my own heart told me something was wrong. Her eyes were shining as she gazed at him now. But I can no longer defend you, because the truth is more loud than my loyalty. And the truth is, you shattered this family a long time before they ever left. A pin could have fallen in that room and been heard. Kody's attorney cleared his throat discreetly, readjusting his chair, but Kody himself remained motionless, except for the subtle clenching of his fists in his lap. His eyes, which so often flashed annoyance or defiance, were fixed on Robyn with an expression that no one could quite decipher. The judge's tone was smooth, but authoritative. Mrs. Brown, do you have anything else to say? Robyn nodded once. Her last words were not an accusation, but something raw and human. I hope someday you'll see yourself the way I finally do. Perhaps then you'll change. But until then, this chapter is closed. She stepped back from the stand, her tears still flowing, but her face unmoved. The wooden doors at the rear of the courtroom creaked as the bailiff stepped aside to allow her to descend. The noise was nearly iconic, the creak of an ending, the pain of something closing forever. And as she returned to her seat, silence trailed behind her like a ghost. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick, so thick breathing felt like an effort. Robyn's testimony remained suspended there, a fresh sore no one was brave enough to caress. The judge looked down at the pile of papers in front of her, methodically turning the pages of evidence. The only noise in the room was the scratch of the papers being turned. Kody sat stiff at the defense table, fingers interlaced so tightly his knuckles were white. His eyes fixed ahead, not on the judge, not on Robyn, not on anyone. The bailiff advanced and presented the judge a crumpled piece of paper. Everyone in the gallery took a collective breath. The judge opened it slowly, her eyes reading the words before she raised them. Her voice remained steady, but the gravity in it made the room even more tense. This court has considered the testimonies, the evidence given, and the statements provided in the duration of these hearings. The ruling is as follows. Each head stretched forward involuntarily. We find the defendant, Mr. Kody Brown. She took a slow second, slow enough for Christine to grip Janelle's hand, for Mary to take a sharp inhale, for Robyn to stiffen, guilty of coercive control and emotional neglect in the family system. The words land like a rock smashing glass. Christine's hand shot to her mouth. Janelle exhaled in a trembling sob. Even Mary, who had battled so hard for this moment, closed her eyes as if she were taking the truth in slow motion. Kody's head snapped up. Guilty? His voice broke in a tone of incredulity and rage and desperation. You can't be serious. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm, whispering for him to desist, but Kody brushed him aside. This is a family affair. This isn't something you can determine in a courtroom. The judge's voice grew harder. Mr. Brown, rein yourself in. But Kody didn't let up. His voice rose, ringing out against the walls. I have done everything for this family. Everything, and this is how they repay me. With lies? With betrayal? Robyn's voice sliced through him like a knife. No, Kody, with the truth. He stiffened, looking at her for the first time since she had testified. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks smeared with tears, but her gaze did not falter. For a brief moment, the room was quiet once more. The judge then cleared her throat and proceeded. Today's decision by this court will be followed up with an official order of mandatory family mediation and counseling for all parties who are willing. Furthermore, visitation and contact with some family members will be open to review by a licensed family therapist. This isn't about punishing for the sake of punishing, it's about getting to accountability. Kody snorted in derision, slouching back in his chair. The gavel fell once. Court is adjourned. The sound was absolute, but the minute the judge rose from the bench, the room exploded, not in screams, but in the subdued bedlam of naked emotion. Christine flung her arms around Janelle, the two women weeping softly into each other's shoulders. Mary froze for a second, regarding Kody with an inscrutable face, before she turned away. Robyn remained seated, staring down at her hands. It wasn't relief she felt. Not exactly. It was something heavier, the knowledge that the truth had finally been spoken aloud, but that speaking it didn't erase the pain it had caused. Kody stood slowly, his movements stiff. He glanced at Robyn again, his voice low but sharp. You've destroyed me. She held his gaze. No, Kody, you broke yourself. I just quit denying it. For the first time, Kody seemed to have no response. His mouth dropped a little, then closed. He walked away, out the door with his attorney following behind him. Walking past Christine and Janelle, they both stepped aside, their eyes tracking him, but their faces providing nothing. Mary stood by the aisle, her eyes on Robyn. You made the right decision, she murmured. Robyn had a half smile, bitter. Then why does it feel so wrong? Mary didn't respond, because they both knew the truth. Right didn't necessarily bring peace. Sometimes it brought a hollow that would take years to fill. The audience started to leave, their whispers filling the air where there had been tension. The sound of footsteps on the marble floor replaced the racing heartbeat of the trial. At last, Robyn stood. She gave one final glance at the defense table now empty, where she had once deluded herself into thinking she and Kody would stand before the world together. Now there was an empty chair and a glass of water, half drank and forgotten. She moved toward the door, her pace slow but sure. Christine grabbed her arm as she walked by. You were brave today. Robyn's eyes gentled. It didn't feel like bravery. It felt like breaking. Christine squeezed her hand. Sometimes breaking is the only way to rebuild. And with that, Robyn walked through the thick wooden doors, leaving the echoes of the trial behind. The corridor beyond was silent, but no less oppressive. The cameras were present, journalists waiting for any response, but Robyn didn't halt. She didn't say a word. She went through them all, her gaze rigidly ahead. Because this part of the story was done, and whatever lay ahead, she would deal with it by herself.